Hello and welcome to LoveReading LitFest. My name is Joy Court and I'm particularly delighted to be the host of this event. I'm a love reading editorial expert and reviewer, and I was lucky enough to be the one to review the wonderful book that we're going to be discussing today with the author Tia Fisher and one of our amazing reading ambassadors, Betty. Welcome both.
Thank you. Thank you.
Crossing the Line is published by Hot Key Books and it comes out on March 30th. It is one of our Love Reading for Kids books of the month and one I have highlighted as a star book of the year. It's an immersive and powerful verse novel about terrifying county lines child exploitation by drug gangs, and also a nuanced and highly credible portrait of a young man and the complexities of his life at home and at school. In my review, I said, this is an outstanding and important novel that should be widely read by parents and teachers, as well as by the young people who will find it gripping, relatable, authentic, and unputdownable. So you can see why I'm excited about the prospect
I'm excited
of finding out more about the author and the process of getting it published. Because astonishingly, Crossing the Line is Tia Fisher's debut novel. She has published poems in the Rialto, and a YA novel was longlisted for the Dyslexia Children's Novel Award, but this is her first published novel. She currently works in a busy library in South London, but former incarnations include spells as an English teacher for speakers of other languages, as a social media pundit, an advertising account manager, a copywriter, a TV presenter, a voiceover artist, and a mercifully brief stint as a life drawing model. And before all of that, she studied drama and English literature at the University of East Anglia and is currently part-time at Bath University, taking her master's in writing for young people. Tia lives with her husband and teenage children and two noisy cats, who all resist her attempts to use them as source material. Before I hand over to Betty, our reading ambassador, who has come up with some really insightful questions after reading Crossing the Line, I'll tell you a little bit about her too. Betty is 16, naturally loves reading, particularly Russian and absurdist literature, which is very impressive. Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier is her favourite novel. She has aspirations to be a writer and writes articles for a local magazine and also writes poems and short stories. So she is the perfect interviewer for Tia. But first, I just can't resist asking you, Betty, how you felt when you came across a character called Betty in Crossing the Line.
I was so excited. I can't tell you how few characters there are with my name. You go to those tourist shops with the keychains that say people's names. There's never a Betty, ever. So I was thrilled. And she's smart as well, which is nice to see.
Yeah, Betty really rocks. I think she's a great character. Yeah. Right, over to you, Betty, for your questions.
Well, first of all, Tia, I just wanted to say that I was so excited to read your book and I loved it. I thought the way that you used free verse as opposed to traditional, like, kind of narrative structure, I would say, it blew me away because you don't see poetry so often in the media, especially not for young people. So I think bringing it back into the conscience, back into young people's kind of minds is really important. Which I guess is my first question. Why have you chosen to use it?
I've been writing in verse for a few years because although this is my first published novel, of course, it's not my first novel. It's about my fifth, three of which are verse novels. And I came to it, I first read Sarah Crossan. So if you want to read verse novels, you do well to start with her. She wrote a book called The Way to Water. And I sat on a sofa one afternoon and I could not move until I'd finished it. And it did the thing which I hope my book does, where it just pulls you through it, pulls you through it, pulls you through. I was so impressed, and I discovered this form. It's not quite a genre, but form genre. And because I used to write poetry, I tried it, and it felt like skating down an icy stream. It felt like, oh my goodness, this is me. I can do this. And I didn't look back. And the reason why I think it works so brilliantly for young people, like I say, it pulls you on. And in the case of Crossing the Line, where Eric talks about how his life is like dominoes of bad decisions, it's like dominoes. The poems kind of rock into each other, I think, like a domino run. And all that white space, if you pick up a traditional prose novel, it's quite scary. If you're not a massively engaged reader like you, Betty, it's quite hard, and you think, well, I can't do this, and you just throw the whole thing away. Whereas this thing, all the white space, you can breathe, and it kind of helps you. And there are sort of, I guess, people probably tell me this is not the word, but I call them Easter eggs. There are kind of tricks within the book which keep you engaged, like the way I've used concrete poetry. And you can give so many rewards to the reader, like the way that the final line of a poem can just turn the whole thing on its head like that, and you suddenly get what the writer meant. I just think it's a brilliant, brilliant medium for young people. I think it's lovely.
It is. I think it's absolutely fantastic. I'm a big fan of verse novels, and I've described them in the past. It's like mainlining emotion.
Yes, what a good way of putting it. Yeah.
Because that's how it feels to me. And because it is, as you say, it's so unthreatening, it's brilliant for reluctant readers, isn't it? Do you think this would be a good time, Betty, for Tia to give the audience a bit of a flavour of the book by doing some reading for us?
Absolutely. I think this is the perfect time.
Okay, right. Well, I'm going to read to give you a bit of a flavour of my main character, Eric's journey. I'm going to read from the start, and also kind of the way that it's structured. I'm going to read from the start. A question for you. Do you feel safe? Safe. Like opening your front door and just walking out, like not checking the air for danger, checking left, right, left, right, left, right, cautious as a little kid crossing the road. Safe. Like the map of your city isn't riddled with holes of black, scorch, no-go postcodes where your life's worth less than paper. Safe. Like waving mum goodbye and not thinking the next time she sees you, you might be on a slab. That kind of safe. It's been so long since I wasn't afraid. It's been years since I wasn't always looking over my shoulder. I'm so tired. I reckon the last time I felt really, really, really safe was the first day of Holland Road Secondary. Picture this. I'm standing on our doorstep in a brand new too big blazer with a nervous too wide smile. I'm 11, happy. Got no idea of what's about to hit me. I'm squinting into the September sun at Dad's enormous grin of pride, Dad's face. It rips my heart when I think of it now. I'm hopping from foot to shiny, new-shoed foot, embarrassed and giggling, but still gagging to start at Holland Road Secondary. Honestly, I was pathetic. Min kicke Viking, Dad says, click, click, clicking away. I was this handsome Viking. Yuck. Is that Swedish? Close. Norwegian. I always thought it sounded such a stupid language. Still do. Never learned, and it's too late now. For goodness sake, Andreas! That's Mum grabbing the camera from Dad's hands. You'll make Eric late. I hate the stupid way my parents spelled my name. I hate a lot of things these days. And then later on, Eric goes to school, he gets bullied, he gets involved with the bad lot, he starts dealing in drugs, and it's all quite easy. But then he wants to get out, but he gets offered an opportunity to make some money for his mum that she really, really needs. And he takes the offer to go country. So he gets in a car, he gets driven out to the seaside, He gets kind of dumped outside this wreck of a place, and he goes in. There's no hall. The front door leads straight into a narrow room where the air is thick and funky with the smell of weed. It's dim in there, the light filtered through paper taped onto the windows. In the underwater gloom, I'm blinded after the sunlit street. A deep voice says, "Give me the pack, fam." And a dark shape rises from the sofa, hands stretching out to grab my bag. No! I hug it tighter, remembering K1's "don't trust no one." As my eyes adjust, I see a room messy, like it just got hit by a tornado. Broken chairs, a sofa with the foam erupting out, bottles and cans and takeout cartons, a coffee table with a bong, a dirty t-shirt, a set of scales. The smell. This place makes the Nightingale Trap House look like it's been keeping up with the Kardashians.
Amazing.
Well done.
Like a round of applause. That's incredible to actually hear you read. You mentioned, didn't you, that you use concrete poetry, and I wanted just to, because I think this is one of the cleverest examples, and obviously highlighting something significant. And I wondered whether that was how you envisaged the poems as you wrote them.
Yes and no, not so much. I went through a process. So, and obviously, you know, Betty, that when you write, you draft, you redraft, you draft, you redraft, and then the joy of being edited by a professional editor, which is the best experience in the entire universe. It's fabulous. So I had the, you know, the indentations and things like that. I had the indentations, I had the stanzas, I had worked out a lot of it. And then I started the MA. I'm doing this MA in creative writing down at Bath, and I was doing the editing process with my editor at that point, and the people on my MA said, "Go for it, push a little more, go on." And I remember, do you know the one? I don't know, let me find it, the locker one, which is one of my absolute favorites. Oh, there we go. So that's Eric when he's been shut into a locker at school, and I kind of done it roughly, and then my tutor on the MA, this marvelous man called Finbar Hawkins, said, "I think you can do more." And so I did. And so I just took each one more and more and spent hours, days, weeks on adjusting words and doing it. Yeah, and they just developed. And I felt as each one came, I just thought, yeah, that's really adding to it, you know. Yeah, so they developed, I guess, is the answer to that in short.
Fantastic. So I did have a question. Did you always know how Crossing the Line was going to end, or did you find that the ending actually developed with the characters?
That is such a brilliant question, Betty. No one's asked me that before. And my editor at Hockey will tell you, she had it was really different when it first reached her, and she said, and she was right. And you know, when you know something isn't quite right and you're trying to pretend it's okay, that's it. She said no. So I worked on it, and I worked. I mean, it was so difficult, this book, more than any other book, because with other books, you're thinking about your dramatic structure and your theme.
Yeah.
But because this is based on real lives and real experiences, I'm having to work within the parameter of what is real. So, and I have a responsibility as well. So I needed to present an ending that was realistic, an ending that was hopeful, an ending that worked with the dramatic, you know, structure of the piece. And so I worked on it and worked on it and worked on it. And yeah, it eventually I was happy. And then I went back to the Children's Society, who were the people that I consulted with, and they read it for sensitivity and for authenticity. And they said, yeah, that works. So, yeah.
Well, the ending was fantastic. I thought it was really good.
I'm glad you liked it.
So why have you chosen to include coronavirus? Because when I read that, it really shocked me, probably more than the county lines did, because it's so new. It brought everything into perspective a little bit, especially for a young person. I was really impressed, actually.
All right.
To do it. So I suppose my question is, why have you chosen to include it?
Do you know, it never occurred to me not to. While I was writing it, so I was thinking about writing it and running away from writing it because it was so hard and so difficult. For the first lockdown, and then the bit into Christmas, and then in March 21, when Hotkey said, actually, we're really interested in this book, have you written it yet? And I hadn't. I'd spent all this time running away and not writing it. I started writing it. So we were just emerging from lockdown there. And I knew that I wanted my character not to have a father. And I knew I wanted him to have gone through this big emotional experience and not to have been able to talk about it properly. And of course, people were dying so horribly, so many of them, so many young people who shouldn't have died were dying from this. So it was just, it was perfect for me to do that. And I'm sort of aware of the fact that it might actually date the book, but that's kind of okay with me because it belongs to its time. So, yeah.
It makes it so much real, don't you think, Betty?
Yeah. No, I thought it was actually fantastic because it's almost, I suppose County Lines is quite discussed. It's not as discussed as it should be, and people fall victim to it every single day, which is what we've seen in the book, which is really cool. But coronavirus actually made it a lot more personal, and I think that's going to really resonate with a lot of young people. So I'm really, really excited that you've included that. And actually, it is dated in that way because it means that you'll grow up understanding actually these pressures and these experiences that people have gone through. It's very well done.
Well, of course, the other awful thing is that they are horribly linked, County Lines and you know, the lockdown, because everything was so much worse in terms of County Line when lockdown finished, because so many children, you know, the schools had lost track of them.
This is another question. I probably should have asked it to you earlier, but what inspired you to write about County Lines?
And I talk quite a lot about this in the author's notes at the end of the book. It was around about 2018. My closest friend has a son who's the same age as my oldest son. They've grown up together. And this kid was lovely, 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 lovely. And then we saw him and he wasn't lovely, and he became unlovelier and unlovelier. And I thought it was just teenage narkiness, you know. And then it turned out that it wasn't. He'd got involved in County Lines, and he was, by the time I understood about it, he was ill. He was really ill. He became anorexic. He couldn't leave his house. He was so scared. It was horrible. And I talked to him about it, and I went to try and find out about it. What was there? What was on the shelves for children? And there was nothing. There were some government reports. There was a storyline in Hollyoaks. A few documentaries, really very, very little else, and nothing for children. So I decided I had to write about it, and then I started researching it, and then I got really scared, and as I said, I stopped writing about it because it was too much. But I came back, and the boy on whose story Erica's based, my character Erica's based, was so behind me. He really, really wanted his story to get out there so that people could, you know, not make the same mistake.
That's immense that it's a true story, that you've based it off somebody else's experience. I think that's really brave of you and him actually to come forward with that. It's incredible. So well done.
Yes, I concur. I think that's why I want everybody to read it. You know, this is an important story, and it needs to be, you know, people. I press the book into as many people's hands as I can. People need to read this.
Thank you. It's really important.
So what does your writing process look like?
You say process. So it really depends what stage I'm at and what I'm doing. So at the moment, I'm not writing very much at all because I'm doing publicity for this book, and also because of stuff I'm doing in the MA. The MA is just reaching a particular point. If I'm first drafting or sort of second drafting, where I've got a really lovely, lovely concentrated period of writing, then it'll be getting up, sitting at my desk, going for a walk. Walking is brilliant. Walking or biking, they just jiggle the ideas loose. Coming back, sitting at my desk, trying to get, I don't know, maybe 1,000 words done. I write into this program called Scrivener, and when I've done 1,000 words, it kind of pats me on the head and said, well done, you did good. and I do go back. A lot of writers say they don't go back and read what they've done, revise what they've done. Everybody's different, but I do, because I kind of need things to be as okay as they can be before I move on. Everyone's different. Some people plan, some people don't. And I'm somewhere in between. I'm trying to plan more because it does save you time, and I'm trying to be more aware of structure. But I don't have this sort of religious routine. I'm a mum and I work and I have cats, and you don't get to protect your writing time quite as nicely.
That's really interesting, because I suppose it's definitely I wonder if it's different to how you would write like a traditional narrative, doing it in free verse, if there's
I see what you mean. Okay.
Well, both questions
No,
are
well,
yeah.
I'm doing at the moment, the book that I'm writing at the moment is a middle grade verse, a middle grade prose. So it's completely different, historical, totally different. So I'm trying to think of the different. Yes, they are. Because of the way you can write in nuggets with verse, you can get this sort of sense of accomplishment, and you can think, oh, I've written like 5 nuggets today, and then you go in and tweeze because you're paring down and paring down and paring down and paring down. So I'd actually say that for me, writing in verse is easier than writing in prose. Yeah, it is a little bit different. But in terms of the structure, no. Same story structure idea behind it.
Amazing. So when I was reading, I was actually really struck by how developed every single character is. And I think for free verse, where you have fewer words to work with, that's really impressive. And you actually, in children's books, often the cast of background characters can be a little bit plot structure-y. That's what I find difficult when I'm reading. But for example, Ravi was really well developed. And then he had his own part to play, and like he factored into the plot. And then even Ravi's dad, for example, at the end becomes a really important figure. Well, when I read it, that's what I found. So I was just wondering how you built up your characters, particularly the secondary ones, to make them more realistic.
They develop like anything else. Have you ever been to I don't know, a place where they do a pavement artist do those sort of cartoon sketches of people, you know, and they'll grab some part, like if you've got a big nose, they'll grab your nose first and they'll work around that. Characters are like that. You get a sort of idea of them, and for me it might not be visual, it might be with Eric. The idea behind him was attitude. I just got this, this bloke, really punchy. Ravi, it was a kind of earnest softness. I kind of pictured somebody pushing his glasses up his nose, and these soft brown eyes and this earnest, lovely, pudgy softness. It came about, and you build and you go over them again, and you go over them again, and you go over them again, and they become more and more real to you as they, I don't do this thing, people do this thing where they write out people's likes and dislikes, and they build a list. That doesn't quite work for me, but I do sort of know. So if you threw me a question about them, I probably would know it, but I haven't necessarily, spent ages thinking about it. And Ravi's dad, Ravi and Ravi's dad are total heroes. I just love them. Yeah.
That's lovely. That's like a more organic approach to characters I've seen in the past. And actually, when you listen to a lot of interviews, a lot of writers will say, oh, they do a list or they do a mind map. But I actually really like how you've thought about them, and you can really see that actually when you read it. All the characters have their own lives, but you don't realize, like in the text it's not explicit, but you get a sense of who they are. So it's very clever.
I'm so glad that works.
It certainly seems to me that you have a definite image of them in your mind. I mean, I found the characters, there were visual elements in the text, so I could really picture them, but I think you would definitely recognize them if you saw them walking down the street, which I know is a crazy thing to do because they're imaginary anyway, but I do feel as if they inhabit a real space in your mind, and they, that you have a real picture of it. I mean, I did find the descriptions quite visual. Did you?
Yeah, I definitely did. So for example, Eric, one of his I would say, defining features visually is his ginger hair, like straight away, and then that becomes really, really important later on as something that kind of he believes marks him as separate from everyone else. But I also think that actually all the visual cues that we get in the text then becomes more internalized. So even though like lots of people have ginger hair, we would know Eric immediately for his ginger hair, because he kind of takes all of his experiences and he wears it like a badge of honor almost, like because of his hair. It's very interesting. I love it. It's really clever.
Yeah, brilliant.
My last question for you, it's a bit of a big one, which is why I've saved it for last. But if you had 5 tips for aspiring writers, what would they be?
Right, I think I'm probably going to say pretty much the same as everyone else says on this one. So read. You've got to read, and don't just read your genre, read across genres, read up, read down, read all sorts of things, because you learn from other writers all the time, and also you learn what people like, what people need, the way a story structures. So yeah, you've got to read, you've got to write, obviously, keep writing, and again, write outside what you think you want to write, and never stop. Always write. This is going to be, I think, 2 points in one. Write because you love it. So I wrote 5 books before this one got published, and I swear I will keep on writing, because a day when you write is a lot better than a day when you don't. It just is. Even if the words aren't brilliant, just a day when you write is a win. I'm on 3 or 4 now. Oh, something crit. So always, as soon as you can, as soon as you're at a stage in your life where that's possible, form a crit group with some friends, because it's really great to get honest, kind feedback on your work, and you get not only their writing skills, but you get everything that they've lived comes in and looks at your work, and so all their attitudes and perspective comes back at you. But also when you look at their work, you're learning so much from criticizing their work. It's a given. You have to do that. Last one, I think I get one more, right? This is really stupid. When I grew up, I was the only one in our class with a manual typewriter. Joy, you might remember manual typewriters. You've probably never seen one, Betty. But anyway, so I was the only one who had a manual typewriter, and it's really hard to touch type on a manual typewriter. I never learned. And then I had electric, and gradually I got a computer, and I still never learned. And by the time I tried to learn in my mid-30s, it was too late. Learn to touch type. It will save you so much time.
That's an excellent tip. I remember that one.
That's absolutely fantastic, Betty. Some brilliant questions there and absolutely fabulous answers. I think I want to know a bit more about what you're working on and when we might see this next book.
Who knows? Right. So the book I'm working on right now is the book that I have to do as part of my MA. So, and the reason why it's so different from Crossing the Line, there are 2 reasons actually. One is that I was working on editing Crossing the Line, and I couldn't do another heavy issue-based book. It was just too much. So, and the other one, I wanted to go as far outside my comfort zone as I possibly could, while I was within the support of the MA course, which is the most amazing thing to do. I totally recommend it when it's your time, Betty. It's brilliant. So I'm doing historical and prose, and I hope that somebody will pick it up, but it might not be my next book that gets published because of the way, because you need to establish yourself. So I already kind of know the book which is going to follow the book that I'm working on at the moment, and I can't tell you what it is, except that if a publisher does take it, it's really polemic. It's really, really polemic, and I feel it's as important as Crossing the Line is. And so I really hope it'll be a verse novel. It'll be YA, a little bit older.
Yeah.
And I really hope I get it written, and I really hope I get it published.
So do I.
Amazing. That sounds fantastic.
Absolutely fantastic. I mean, I can't imagine that Hotkey will want to let you out of their sites at all.
I hope not, because they are brilliant. I love them.
Wasn't that fantastic? I want to thank you both for such a fascinating discussion. So I can't believe how quickly the time has gone. But in conclusion, I just want to remind everyone out there, Crossing the Line publishes on the 30th of March, published by Hot Ebook, written by the amazing Tia Fisher. This is a book which is an absolute must read. Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.